The Monday night loss to the Dolphins proves one thing. Right now, the Jets are the worst team in the NFL. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We are here, unfortunately, to recap yet another New York Jets loss. The Jets fell last night to the Miami Dolphins in South Florida. Final score 27-21. Dolphins get their first win of the season. Jets fall to 0-4. I think it's clear that this game shows right now the Jets are the worst team in the NFL. However, there were some positives we can take from the game, so we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about where the Jets could go from here. How can the Jets even partially salvage this 2025 season? There are ways, believe it or not, but we have to begin by talking about the negative. I think by any measure, this was a dismal performance by the New York Jets. And I think this game showed, again, the Jets right now on September 30th, 2025 are the worst team in the NFL. That may not be true by the end of the season. NFL seasons have lots of twists and turns. Teams rise, teams fall. We can hope the Jets rise. And later in the episode, we'll talk about some of the ways the Jets can rise going forward. But there's nothing good you can say about this Jets season at this point. The team is 0-4. The team looks terrible. And to be the worst team in the NFL, it's not just about lacking talent, because a team that's short on talent can punch above its weight class. There are teams that are not super talented that can give you everything you want to handle. Teams that play smart, teams that play opportunistic football. To be the worst team in the NFL, you can't just be bad. You have to be bad, and you have to be a dumb team. And right now, the Jets are a dumb team. And it's not just enough to be bad and dumb. You have to be sloppy. And the Jets are a sloppy team, because for all of the issues the Jets have personnel-wise, for all the issues they've had this season, 3 of the 4 games have been winnable. At the very least, a smart team, an opportunistic team would be 2-2. And there is a path for the Jets right now to be 3-1, but they couldn't take advantage because they're just not a smart team right now. They're not a team that plays fundamentally sound football. And you just see it all over the field. It starts with Braylon Allen fumbling the ball going in for a touchdown on the Jets' first offensive series. And Braylon Allen's not a fumbler, but I think sometimes what happens in these situations where nothing goes right is that guys just try and do too much. They lose track of the fundamentals. I think on Allen on that play, maybe he didn't hold the ball as tightly as he could have. He's trying to score. He's trying to, get this thing going for the Jets because nothing's going right, and he fumbles the ball away. And that was one of the stories of the night. The offense actually did a pretty decent job moving the ball. The offense did not go 3 and out once all night, but it felt like whenever the Jets were getting into scoring range, somebody would make a huge mistake. It started with the Allen fumble. Sometimes it was a penalty. In fact, it frequently was a penalty that kind of short-circuited a very promising drive. And then we could talk about the defense. And this was just a terrible defensive performance. I think on the offensive side of the ball, you saw a unit that moved the ball effectively, but just made the big error at the wrong time too frequently. That's what happened on offense. That's different from the defense. The defense, which just got absolutely dominated by a Miami offense that had not looked good up to this point. And there are lots of issues with this defense right now. I think you got to start with the coaching. And I don't like calling out a coach 4 games into a season, especially when he's in his first year. But Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator, more and more is looking like a Hackett of the defense to me, because his approaches just make no sense. The Jets came out in this game. And look, I said heading into this game, I thought the Jets should play more zone coverage because I was worried about Miami's speed, particularly against Brandon Stevens. But if you're going to play zone coverage, you have to play effective zone. You have to play a zone system that makes sense. Jets came out of this game and just conceded easy completions to Tyreek Hill. You got to challenge receivers in zone coverage. There's a difference between just playing zone and playing zone effectively. The coverages the Jets came out with just made no sense. And I think it just speaks to the level of hopelessness on this team, where I saw there were so many key moments. I was just waiting for something to go wrong. Miami's second offensive series, they had a 4th and goal on the 4-yard line. And this is after they'd driven the ball from their own 4-yard line after the Braylon Allen fumble. They went for it. And I had two thoughts pop into my head when Miami left their offense on the field to go for it. Number one was, in a normal situation, this call would make no sense. Now, I'm all about embracing analytics, and analytics typically say teams should be more aggressive going for it on fourth downs. But fourth and goal from your own 4-yard line, from the other team's 4-yard line in the first half, that's not a move that really makes a lot of sense. You should kick the field goal normally. But my second thought was, I have no faith the Jets are going to stop this play. And they didn't. And that made the move logical to me, because you knew the Jets weren't going to get a stop. And what happens? Darren Waller, who's been out of the NFL for over a year, catches a touchdown pass on Sauce Gardner in coverage. It was one of the stories of the night on defense. There was another play, Devon Achane. He's one-on-one in a scoring situation against Tony Adams. Tony Adams is the only guy that can bring him down in the open field before he goes to the end zone. I said, Adams is going to miss the tackle. It shows you how unfundamentally sound this football team is right now. I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, how many times did somebody line up out of position? How many times was there no communication in the secondary? Basic things, guys running into each other because nobody's calling out pick plays. They're just not executing on a fundamental level. And again, and this has been one of the themes of the season, you've seen kind of confusion in assignments. Guys don't really know what they're supposed to be doing on the back end of this defense. And I think a lot of that goes to coaching. But there's also really dumb penalties. And I guess where I get frustrated with the Jets is not the lack of talent, because we know the roster is deficient in a lot of areas. We know the Jets began the season with some pretty glaring holes in their starting lineup. And we knew that the Jets could not afford to suffer injuries. And already at this point, we're down Jermaine Johnson. We're down Quincy Williams. So Quincy Williams' injury, along with Marcelino McCrary-Ball's injury, require Kiko Mauigoa to step into the starting lineup. And I remember there was one play, it was very subtle, you probably missed it, but there was one play where Achane hits a hole, Mauigoa is just a little late. And I saw that and I said, you know what? Mauigoa is not the fastest guy in the league. He's low on talent, he's a backup. I can live with that. A few plays later, Mauigoa hits Tua Tagovailoa in the head as Tua is sliding to end a scramble. That's what I can't live with. And I think those two plays represent my frustration with the Jets. It's fine to be low on talent. We know this Jets team's not a Super Bowl contender. We know this Jets team is probably not a playoff contender. They're probably not a team that's going to have a winning record. And those things were never realistic. But this team, despite its talent issues, right now is playing below its talent level. There's no way you could look at the Jets defensive personnel heading into the season and think this was a top 5 unit. They're not as deep on the defensive line as they were during the best days of the Saleh Ulbrich defense. But I don't see how a defense can have pieces like Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams and be this bad. And part of it's that, Sauce and Quinnen are not playing up to their normal standard. And even like the secondary guys, Will McDonald and Jamie Sherwood aren't really having good seasons. My hope was that the good players on this defense would lift everybody else up. Unfortunately, the issues with this defense seem to be dragging down even the top end talent that the Jets have. I think a lot of this goes to coaching. But on the offensive side of the ball, again, how many times were the Jets moving the ball? How many times did a drive look promising and a big penalty happens? Somebody makes a really dumb play, and a lot of the penalties were not very smart. Now, the Jets had some bad luck in this game. Miami put the ball on the ground a couple of times, and the Jets didn't recover. Jets still don't have a turnover this year, whereas every time the Jets put the ball on the ground, the Dolphins recovered. And the officiating, my goodness. And we frequently think that the officials are biased against our team. We remember all the bad calls. We don't remember the calls that go our way. But, the Garrett Wilson offensive pass interference that took a touchdown off the board, ridiculous. They hold on Josh Myers where Joe Tittman draws an illegal hands to the face, should have been offsetting penalties, absurd. John Simpson gets a 15-yard penalty. Shortly after that, Justin Fields gets tackled 5 yards out of bounds. There's no flag. Even late in the game, Jeremy Ruckert received a late hit. There was no flag. Dan Orlovsky on ESPN called it out. Bad luck, but a lot of this was just the Jets' self-inflicted errors. How about a kick returner who fumbles the ball and then fair catches the ball on the 3-yard line on a punt? Only the Jets could cut Xavier Gibson and find the one return guy in the NFL who's more useless than him. Only with the Jets could this happen. There's nothing good you can say about the New York Jets right now. The hope is that things improve. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about one of the areas for hope with this team. And believe it or not, despite how ugly this game was, there was one unit that actually performed well, and a contender for a key role may have emerged in this game. we'll discuss as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. They're portable, big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere, and you will love that boost when you need it. There's so many great flavors. They're all refreshing, and they'll give you that quick lift before a busy day. It kicks in fast, and it's sugar-free, so you don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Again, it's 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The New York Jets had an ugly loss last night to the Miami Dolphins. They fell 27-21 in South Florida. The Jets fall to 0-4 on the season, so there's really not a lot good you can say about this team after that game. But believe it or not, there actually is a positive I can take from this game. And that was the way the Jets moved the ball on the Miami defense. So I don't want to say it was a good performance offensively because every time the Jets were in a key spot, it felt like somebody would make a big mistake. It started with the Braylon Allen fumble on the first drive as the Jets are going in for a touchdown. And the Jets ran the ball very effectively at the start of the game, a very physical drive that was mostly based on the run game. The Jets started this game with 13 run attempts on their first 14 plays. So Jets did not really put the ball in the air much. Yesterday's show, I said the Jets need to throw the ball effectively to win the game. And I think that was true. They eventually did need to go to the pass, but Jets almost saying, hey, John, here's what we think about your analysis that we need to throw the ball. They come out, run the ball 13 times, first 14 plays, and do it effectively. And it was the start of an effective night, at least in terms of moving the football, because as I mentioned earlier, the Jets did not go 3 and out once in this game. And that's an impressive feat. Now, of course, the caveat is that the Miami defense has been awful through the early part of the season. But I think you have to separate the offensive performance from the defensive performance. I think that there's a big difference between the defense getting gashed by a Miami offense, which has been bad, and the Jets offense maybe making some big mistakes, but otherwise on a play-to-play basis being fairly effective. And I think that this is going to fly under the radar, but Justin Fields actually played pretty well in this game. We talked yesterday about how when Justin Fields is coming off an awful performance, it's usually 50-50. Sometimes he plays really well, sometimes he doesn't. In fact, about 6 out of I went through his performances based on ESPN's QBR stat, and of his 12 worst games, in 6 of them he bounced back and had a really good game the next week. I think we can make it 7 because Fields bounced back from his 1.1 QBR 2 weeks ago against the Buffalo Bills. He was at a 76.7, and this is a rating of 1 to 100. So 76.7 is pretty good. You can look at the stats: 20 for 27, 226 yards. So that's an 8.4 yard average and a touchdown. And then he also added 81 yards on the ground on 7 carries, and he ran for a 43-yard touchdown. Now, I mean, some of this came when the Dolphins were playing prevent. The Jets got a late touchdown where the Dolphins were just trying to run off the clock, so they were playing pretty soft zone. They were conceding some completions to the Jets. But you look at this game, this was a good step forward for Justin Fields. Now, one of the things we talked about a lot on the show with Justin is that it's never been a question whether or not he's got ability. It's never been a question about whether or not he can put a good game together. The question's always been, can he avoid those games like he had week 2 against the Buffalo Bills? That game's in the history books now. So there's nothing we can really do about it. All we can do is just hope that this is the start of a more consistent Justin Fields going forward. And that 43-yard touchdown run was a spectacular run. It was a spectacular scramble. It was on a 4th down play where I don't think Tanner Engstrand called a great play because that play should have been stopped. And Fields' athleticism just took over. And I think one of the challenges for Tanner Engstrand moving forward is try and get Justin Fields in situations where he doesn't think. Try and get Justin Fields into situations where he just reacts on instinct. Because when Justin Fields reacts on instinct, that athleticism takes over, that speed, and you can see spectacular runs like you saw in the 3rd quarter when Fields took a 4th down play that by all accounts should have been stopped for nothing and turned it into a touchdown that at least momentarily put the Jets back into the game. But there was another development that I thought was pretty important in this game. Now, we know Garrett Wilson's an excellent number 1 receiver. I mean, it's tough to find any fault with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson might be the one player on this Jets roster who has been as good as we were hoping he'd be this year. And Garrett posted another game, 6 catches for 82 yards. He had a touchdown. And I'm just going to say it. that second touchdown should have counted. He got robbed of a touchdown by an absolutely bogus offensive pass interference call. And that was, again, one of the stories of this game. It's not the reason the Jets lost, but the officiating in the second half was ridiculously one-sided. And the Jets lost out on a lot of bad calls. And that was the most glaring, because that should have been a touchdown. A touchdown there may have changed the game. But Garrett Wilson's delivered. The issue has been finding the number 2 receiver, because Tyler Johnson's gotten opportunities. He hasn't stepped up. Allen Lazard's Allen Lazard. I mean, I don't know what to tell you at this point. If you're expecting anything good from Allen Lazard in a Jets uniform, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. And Josh Reynolds has been kind of a non-factor. And he's been every bit the non-factor we've expected him to be. In last night's game, it felt like in the second half, Justin Fields started to trust a guy as the number 2 option. And that guy is the rookie out of LSU, Mason Taylor. And we know Taylor's gotten off to a slow start. I mean, the Jets kind of began the season and felt like they wanted Jeremy Ruckert as kind of their number 1 guy at the tight end position. And one of the things that I've been warning about since the day the Jets drafted Taylor was it could be a slow process with him. This is a guy who was not a finished product when the Jets took him in the second round out of LSU, learning a lot of new stuff. He's got to get up to speed on blocking technique at the tight end position. He's got to run a more diverse route tree. But this was around the point where, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, I was hoping to start to see Taylor take some strides. And just as important as Taylor taking strides, and he's a guy, big guy, and he's got, I think, rare ability to change direction smoothly. I think his breaks are very smooth for a guy of his size. Usually tight ends, there's a lot of build up, there's a lot of slow down, there's a lot of they don't go 0 to 60 very fast because they're just so big. They're not quick twitch guys. The bigger guys tend to take longer to build up, and then they have to slow down. Taylor's very fluid in his movements. But just as important, it felt like Justin Fields began to trust him. In a way, you can tell Justin Fields doesn't have a lot of trust with any receivers other than Garrett Wilson. Part of that's because of Garrett Wilson's caliber of a receiver. Garrett Wilson's an excellent number 1 receiver. Part of it's also just that the two of them played together in college. And a lot of the time, a lot of those plays, Taylor was just kind of running his route to the open spot in the field. But Fields was throwing the ball on time. He kind of started to trust that Taylor was going to get to the right spot. Longer term, I don't know that Taylor is necessarily a number 2 option in a good passing game. I think he might be more of a number 3 option in a quality passing game, but the Jets don't really have anybody else right now. I mean, the Jets made their decision to the wide receiver position that they made this offseason. They're sticking with the trio of Johnson, Lazard, and Reynolds. And I think that the Jets coaching staff and front office heading into the season had something in mind when they built this roster. It's mostly a young roster. They got rid of most of the veterans. I think to the extent they kept veterans, there was a goal in mind. And it wasn't that they were going to get big production out of these veterans. I think that the goal was, because they have such a young roster, such impressionable young guys, what they were going to prioritize in veteran players are guys who are good locker room guys who can show these youngsters how to act like professionals, guys who can show them how to work, how to study film, all that stuff. I mean, you see it across the roster. There aren't a lot of good veterans on this team. The veterans who are on this team are kind of journeymen, but generally speaking, they're guys who are good influences on young players. At the wide receiver position, and look, I'm not saying I like that approach. I've criticized that approach, so don't complain to me about that approach. I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not saying I agreed with it. And at the wide receiver position, I think it's caused problems for the Jets because there's just not a lot of talent there after Garrett. I mean, the only guy with real upside after Garrett is Arian Smith, who's a very raw 4th-round rookie. And this opens up an opportunity for Mason Taylor going forward. We know that defenses are going to do everything in their power to obstruct Garrett Wilson. We know we're going to see double teams. We're going to see obstructions. We're going to see teams rolling coverage in his direction. That opens up opportunities for everybody else. And at some point, Garrett needs a break. You can't throw every target to Garrett Wilson. So there has to be another option in the passing game. I think for the first time, we started to see Mason Taylor emerge as that potential other option. And it's a good thing. And, this is one of the things I'm going to be looking for with Mason Taylor, because we know this Jets season at 0-4 is not going to be about the playoffs. It's really about building something for the future. I hate how often I have to say that at this time of year. It feels like every year we're at the end of September and I'm saying, well, we're focused on the future now because the season's lost. Very frustrating. But the Jets, if Mason Taylor starts to improve, if Mason Taylor starts to come on, and I think it's going to be a slow process. I think he's a better player now than he was week 1. I think by week 18, we want him to be a much better player than he is right now heading into week 5. But I think this was an encouraging performance by the offense. by Justin Fields, but especially out of Mason Taylor. And I think that could have big implications for the Jets going forward, because if there's a second guy that Justin Fields can throw the ball to, it makes the offense at least a more credible passing attack. And that's something the Jets are going to need going forward. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll continue to look over the horizon. We know this Jets season is probably not going to end in success if you define success as the playoffs, if you define success as finishing the season with a winning record. But I don't know that's ever been the goal. I think we're all disappointed with the 0-4 start, but there are still ways the Jets can build going forward and leave us feeling good about the team heading into 2026. We'll talk about what those ways are as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching the Jets or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. The Jets are hosting the Dallas Cowboys this coming weekend. It'll be Sunday, Week 5 action. The Cowboys are 2.5-point road favorites heading into MetLife Stadium right now on FanDuel. I think it says it all, the fact that a team like the Dallas Cowboys is going to be a road favorite against the Jets. I think it speaks volumes about the Jets season. Hopefully we start to see some improved Jets football. Well, on FanDuel, it's the best place to get in on the action. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We are coming off a Jets loss. They fell to the Miami Dolphins last night in South Florida. The final score was 27-21. The Jets fall to 0-4 on the season. We are looking, my friends, at yet another disappointing season of Jets football. This is a team that's almost certainly heading to a 10th straight losing season and a 15th straight season without making the playoffs. And I don't need to tell you this. It's a bad time to be a Jets fan. And I think at times like this, it's difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's difficult to see any sort of silver lining. I will tell you that one thing that brings me peace as a Jets fan, though, in 2025 is I can at least see a path forward, even after an 0-4 start, where we can reach the end of the season and feel decent about the Jets heading into 2026. And that was not true a year ago. A year ago, of course, the Jets spent so many of their resources trying to build for the here and now. It was a Super Bowl or bust season. I mean, every announcer for every game talked about how the Jets were all in. So when the Jets got off to a terrible start last year, there was nothing redeeming about it. There was no way for the Jets to turn it around. Any late season win were meaningless. Beating Jacksonville in December didn't really matter. Beating the Dolphins the last week of the season didn't really matter, even though I guess it technically eliminated Miami from the playoffs. This year's a little bit different. This is the start of a new build. And I know you've heard that before. We feels like every couple of years we got a new regime in here, we got a new coaching staff, a new front office, and the Jets are telling us it's going to be different. They finally found the right guys, and I can't blame you if you don't have faith in the Jets right now, because I feel like we've just heard the same things over and over, the same promises made by this franchise. But what I will say is that this season's never been about finishing with a winning record. This season's never been about making the playoffs, which is tough to say when you've missed the playoffs for 14 straight years and you've had 9 straight losing seasons. But it's where we are as a franchise. This season's always been about focusing on the future. So even at 0-4, you can see the Jets, you can see a scenario where the Jets start to get better slowly over the course of the season. Maybe it's like a team-wide phenomenon of what I just discussed with Mason Taylor, where you knew you weren't expecting much early in the season from Mason Taylor. You're hoping that he'll improve over the course of the season. Well, maybe you can apply that to the entire Jets team. Now, look, I'd be lying to you if I told you I thought this Jets team was going to be 0-4. I think a lot of people, I think you have to be pretty cynical to think the Jets would be 0-4 at this point. And the reason I say that is I know a lot of people thought the Jets were going to be a really bad team, but this team's been in 3 of its 4 games. I mean, just by chance, the Jets probably should have won one of these 4 games so far. I think what's frustrating more than anything is not that they've lost, though. It's the way they've lost. Because as we discussed in the first segment, this isn't just about the Jets lacking talent. This is just being the opposite of the team we wanted to see. Heading into the season, we knew that the Jets had big holes in spots, but we wanted them to be a tough out. We wanted other teams to feel like even if we beat the Jets, they gave us everything we could handle. And the Jets have not given their opponents everything they could handle. The Jets have made it easy on their opponents, and the Jets made it easy on Miami last night. We talked about the breakdowns in coverage, guys just struggling to get lined up correctly. You talk about the penalties, you talk about the turnovers. I mean, you name it. The fair catching the ball at the 3-yard line on a punt. Again, I'm going to reiterate, only the Jets could cut Xavier Gibson and find the one return guy in the NFL more useless than him. I mean, unbelievable. After the guy fumbles in the third quarter to start the second half. Get this guy out of here. Anyway, sorry, end of rant. But the point is, my bigger point here is, if the Jets start to round into form, and this is a young team, and I think on some level, maybe not to the extent we've seen, but on some level, it's understandable to have young guys make mistakes. It's understandable to have young guys not really understand what they're doing. It's understandable to see young guys make dumb plays. What you want to see over the course of the season is things start to trend in the right direction. You want to see less of that moving forward. It'd be tough to see more of it. But you want to start to see this team show genuine improvement. Sometimes what you see is a team looks absolutely lost under a new coaching staff the first month of the season. The Jets are not rare in this. There are lots of coaches where they just look completely in over their head the first month. And the fan base is restless, even in fan bases where you don't have 14 straight seasons of missing the playoffs, even in fan bases where you don't have 9 straight losing seasons. Fan bases get restless when a new coach comes in, makes promises, and does not deliver on them. And I think, to be fair, Aaron Glenn has not delivered on a lot of the stuff he's promised so far. Aaron Glenn promised certain things. He promised discipline. He promised a smarter team. He promised a team that would be tough. And we haven't seen any of them yet. But it's only 4 games. And there's an opportunity for this team to leave us feeling good heading into 2026. And again, this goes back to expectations at the start of the season. The start of last season, it was pretty much, unless the Jets made a deep playoff run, and you could argue, did they need to get to the Super Bowl? Did they need to win the Super Bowl? Anything short of a deep playoff run, at least, was going to be viewed as a colossal failure. This year, you wanted to see the Jets improve over the course of the season. Now, look, you did not want to see a September like this. You did not want to see the first 4 games go like this, where the Jets looked this bad. You're looking to see a more representative team. You're looking to see a team that was at least 1-3, maybe 2-2. If the Jets did that, you start from 2-2 and you start improving, you could be on your way to a genuine surprise season. Of course, the Jets have shown that they're not quite there yet. The Jets are not quite at the level of a team that could get to 2-2, despite the opportunities in front of them. But I think as the season goes on, you want to see the penalties reduce. You want to see guys as they get more reps, the young guys as they get more experience to start to play smarter, more disciplined football. You want to see the Jets make less mistakes. And part of this comes down to the coaching staff. And I'm hard on Steve Wilks because this has been a dismal defensive coaching job so far. And you want to get it on Glenn for that also, that's fine. But look, I put a lot of the blame on Wilks because Glenn seems like more of a CEO type coach. And ultimately, it's Glenn's job. And I'm not defending Glenn on that because if this doesn't improve, one of the biggest tests for Glenn this offseason is going to be, will he make a change? If he doesn't, that's going to be a big mark against Glenn in my book because this cannot continue on defense. So part of this is on the coaching staff to communicate better because the coaching staff's done a lousy job, and that starts at the top. I'm not saying Aaron Glenn's above criticism. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between saying these first 4 games have not been well coached and saying this is definitively not the right coaching staff for the Jets. I think that there's a big difference between those 2 statements. We can evaluate the immediate, we can evaluate game to game, but there's also a bigger picture we have to evaluate. And part of how we will evaluate this coaching staff is how they respond to adversity, because every coaching staff faces adversity. Every coaching staff faces points where it just feels like nothing's working. Now, I think we would have hoped that point wouldn't be 4 games in the first season. I think we would have also hoped that even when things look bad, they wouldn't look this bad, but that's where we are right now with the Jets. And if the Jets, start to turn it around, if they start winning games, if they start being a tough out for some of the better teams on their schedule, even though we're at a point where things look really dismal, we could get to the end of the season and still feel pretty good about this team heading into 2026. I don't know. I feel like I have to give you some hope here. I feel like the Jets aren't doing a very good job. And I feel like, I've been doing this podcast. This is my 10th season doing this. We still haven't had a winning season in all the years I've been doing this. So I feel like I've been giving you hope and hope and hope, and Jets have never really delivered on it. But we're still here. I mean, we're still here. We're still rooting for the Jets, and we still have, for whatever reason, have faith that things can turn it around. And I think that that's really the path forward for the Jets. If you're looking for a reason to continue watching this year, it's hoping to see a younger team slowly start to get better and slowly eliminate the dumb plays and slowly start to add some wins to the ledger. We can hope. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we will have our weekly mailbag.